over it, and now they've ripped the name Labour off.
Question number 3, Dr. Russell Norman.
Cutting.
Order, I've called order.
Cutting.
I apologise, Honourable Member. I've called Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Land Information and asks, did New Zealand's free trade agreement with China play any part in his decision to approve the sale of the Crafar farms to the Shanghai Pengxin Group?
Order, just before I go to the Minister, the wording in my on my sheet is a little different, and I just wonder if the wording on my sheet is influence his decision, not play any part. I wonder which is the correct version. Should I check with the clerk, which is... because there's a difference between influence and play any part. Point of order, Dr. Russell.
I'm sure the error is on my part, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure you're correct. Shall I reread the question?
The member should reread.
My apologies. To the Minister for Land Information, did New Zealand's free trade agreement with China influence his decision to approve the sale of the Crafar farms to the Shanghai Pengxin Group?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr. Speaker, ministers were satisfied that Milk New Zealand met all the relevant criteria under the Overseas Investment Act of 2005. Ministers can only have regard to the criteria and factors that are outlined in that Act. Every application is decided on its individual merits, and the outcome would be the same even if New Zealand did not have a free trade agreement with China. The Overseas Investment Act requires the OIO to treat all applications on an equal basis regardless of the country of origin of the applicants.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
That was, I think, a fine statement of general principles, but I was asking about a specific minister, this one, his decision in a specific case. He did not address that primary question.
Order. I must have misheard the answer, but I thought I heard the minister say that the outcome would have been the same regardless of whether New Zealand had a free trade agreement with China or not, which is another way of saying that it didn't have any impact on the decision. Now, if I'm wrong there, the minister had better correct me very rapidly, but it appears I'm not wrong. Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you for that interpolation. Supplementary. Why then did he tell Mark Sainsbury on Close-Up on 27th of January that when considering Shanghai Pengxin's bid, there were certain requirements New Zealand has to follow in relation to the China-New Zealand FTA?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr. Speaker, because in the China Free Trade Agreement we have given China most favoured nation status. That means that if an application from a Chinese investor met all the criteria of the Overseas Investment Act, which it did, and we were then still to decline it, sir, I think that would send a very, very bad signal for China, to China and our relationship with them.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How does the Minister put the two answers together from the two questions? On the one hand, it had no influence on his decision, and on the other hand, he's gone to some length to tell us how important it was to his decision.
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
With great ease.
Point of order,
Russell
Mr.
Norman.
Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
It was a pretty important and I thought substantive but simple question. How does he put them together? He just said point of ease. That's not really an answer.
No, the Minister said with great ease was his answer. And I've got to confess that is a perfectly accurate, perfectly reasonable answer to the question asked. It's one of the problems with when members ask how can a minister do something or explain something or compare something, that's the kind of answer they risk. There are other ways of wording that kind of question to get the answer the member is seeking. Dr. Russell.
So speaking to the point of order?
Point of order, Dr. Russell.
So is it the Speaker's ruling that that kind of answer is acceptable now in this House?
Order. It has been for an awful long time. I can remember one minister in particular, no longer in this House, that on more than one occasion gave that kind of answer because members need to think about their questions. And when they're shaping a question in their mind, need to be aware that if they ask, how can a minister do something, it's not the smartest way to ask a question because it risks that kind of answer. The remedy's in members' hands to ask questions that avoid that kind of answer.
Supplementary question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Was Shanghai Pengxin wrong when they stated in their application for the Crafar farms that should their bid be turned down, this would adversely affect New Zealand's trade relationship with China and the New Zealand-China Free Trade Agreement?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, I think it's fair to say that if a bid met all of the criteria of the Act, and in many cases over-met all those criteria, then there would be adverse implications if the government was to decline that bid. And frankly, I don't even know what grounds the Minister would be able to do that on without being challenged by judicial review.
The point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Mr Speaker, this was a question about was Shanghai Pengxin wrong? The Minister simply did not address that part of the question. He gave us, I thought, a very valid answer in relation to general government policy. I was asking, was Shanghai Pengxin wrong? I mean, he didn't talk about that.
There are a number of dilemmas about. I don't want to be unhelpful to the member, but the Minister's not actually responsible for Shanghai Pengxin. I mean, it's one of the dilemmas that he's not responsible for what they may say. Now, you've asked him for his opinion on it. He's given his opinion on it. It's difficult for me to be harder on a minister again with that kind of question. And I apologise to the member because I realise I'm not being terribly helpful to him, and I don't want to be unhelpful, but I can't ask ministers to do more than the standing orders require of them. Dr Russel Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has he received any advice from the Overseas Investment Office regarding a visit to the OIO by a senior Chinese government diplomat late last year? And did that Chinese government official raise any issues around the New Zealand-China FTA if the Shanghai Pengxin application was turned down?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, no, and therefore it is not worth speculating on the second part.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If Shanghai Pengxin had no background, no pension, I said. No. I know you can't speak
Order.
Chinese. Well, he wants to interrupt and shows ignorance.
Order. No, order. The member will resume his seat. Now, we don't carry on like that. Admittedly, we don't encourage interjections during, and I'm on my feet, interjections when members are asking questions because it does tend to lead to disorder, but it's no excuse to go with an exchange across the House. The member may now ask his question. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If Shanghai Pengxin did not have any background in farming of this nature, to the extent that they required Landcorp to become tenant farmers in our own country, something the Prime Minister says he frowns on, then how could it possibly have passed the economic test in the first place?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, I'm going to be a bit guarded in answering too much more detail. This matter is still before the court. The judge will be ruling on Friday, and therefore, sir, I don't want to take it any further, other than to repeat once again that all of the criteria under the Act, including the question the member raises about a track record in farming, and Shanghai Pengxin has a track record in farming, sir, but other than that I think it's unwise of me to get into more detail.
Dr Russel Norman.
Mr Speaker, this question and these issues were canvassed at some length.
Is this a point of order?
It is.
I beg your pardon. Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Point of order. This is around the sub judice defence that the Minister just used. These questions went at some length last week in this House. The Prime Minister answered questions about them without seeking this. The Minister himself came to the House during the address and reply speech and gave a long speech about exactly this issue.
Order. There are certain questions that can be asked, and the Minister has answered certain questions, but the Minister is perfectly at liberty to, as further detail is sought around reasons why and justifying and justifications, the Minister is not unreasonable in being cautious since the matter is either before the court or about to be before the court, and that is ministers must, in fact, are required to pay attention to the matter of sub judice, and so it's not unreasonable. Does the member wish to ask further supplementary? Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, seeing as you're effectively saying that he can plead the sub judice rule, but you did not, at the time of my asking the question, rule it out, do I get my question back?
Order. No. The member had his question. Answered, and that's the end of the matter. Dr. Russel Norman. Point of order. The Right
Speaker, my question, my point of order is this: how is the Minister able to plead the sub judice rule now, when on a far broader range of questions last week he and the Prime Minister did not?
The member the member's asking a question, not making a point of order. I mean, the issue of order is simple. Ministers, from time to time, recognise that matters are before the court and therefore choose not to give further detailed answers. They may answer to a certain point and then choose not to go any further. And that is quite proper when matters are before the court. In fact, it is required of us to be cautious when matters are before the court. And ministers have to make that judgment with each question. I mean, it would be unfair to not answer any questions. There's a certain point a minister can go to do with matters that aren't seen to in any way risk compromising what's before the court. And the minister has chosen to do that up to a point, but then the minister has drawn the line about going into further detail, and that is not unreasonable. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, the minister put that at issue when he said that the application met all the criteria, one of which is the economic good to New Zealand. He put it at issue. It wasn't ruled out then. Now he's hiding behind the sub judice rule. He can't surely do that.
And neither can members accuse ministers of hiding behind the sub judice rule. Because points of order are not meant to make accusations. Points of order are meant to be issues to do with order. And the member raised a valid point of order. But the standing orders, the rules remain that ministers have to judge that matter. And on some occasions the Speaker does, and on this occasion I've got no reason to in any way doubt the minister is being reasonable in not wishing to go any further into the detail of the matter because it is before the court. And that is not unreasonable. The Honourable Trevor Mallard, point of order.
Mr Speaker, I have a feeling that both you and the Right Honourable gentleman have misunderstood the comments that have been made by the Honourable Maurice Williamson, who I don't think invoked the sub judice rule about the possibility of influencing the court, but more the rule around prejudicing the Crown's position. And I think there is a difference, sir, and I think it's important that we understand that.
By the way, matters that are before the court are considered to be sub judice and have been for a long time. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't be mentioned. You'll recollect, the Honourable Member will recollect the last Standing Orders Committee, we had quite lengthy consideration of the issue to try and make sure that members could raise matters that were before the court, but they are meant to alert the Speaker if they're going to do so. But on this occasion, a minister has chosen not to give further comment, and I think we should respect that. I think it's a matter that we should respect for whatever aspect of the sub judice issue. Dr. Russell Norman, further, is this a point of order? Point of order.
I promise this will be my last thing. The issue, Mr. Speaker, is about consistency. It's fine to use sub judice, I wouldn't say the word hiding like my colleague, but there has to be consistency about the application. So if we ask one question and the Minister says, I'm happy to answer that, but then we ask a similar question but he doesn't like it, so he says, oh, well, sub judice, I can't answer it. That creates a problem for keeping the government to account.
I hear the member, but it's my assessment that that is not the case, because I can imagine members would get frustrated if that were the case. But there are certain questions to do with the mechanics of a decision, that what's happened and why it might have happened, that ministers would be prepared to answer. But once you get down to the reasons why a certain decision may have been made and get down to, for example, the economic arguments and that kind of issue beyond the fact that the OIO considered the economic arguments had been met, that's a fact, they announced that. That's a simple fact. But once you ask the minister to get down into detail beyond that, I'm not surprised the minister may evoke the sub judice rule at that point, because that's a different level of consideration of the issue, in my opinion. Question, supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Land Information. Is it common practice for senior diplomats from foreign countries to visit the Overseas Investment Office to lobby on behalf of specific applications? And if that were the case, would the Minister expect to be informed?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Well, Mr. Speaker, given I'm not aware of it ever happening, obviously I've not been informed.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has he or his office received any advice from other government ministers or government officials regarding the turning down of the Shanghai Pengxin bid and any adverse impact that may have on our trading relationship with China?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, no, this decision was taken purely on the merits of the application and the recommendation to myself and to the Associate Minister of Finance. Both of us signed off on that recommendation. Whereas I do talk to my colleagues across the board on a range of issues from time to time, this decision was not based on any of those conversations.
Question number 4, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, this question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he have